Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Could you give me a brief history on the Buckler cars, please?
Yeah, Buckler was started by Derek Buckler in 1949, and like a lot of these sports cars of that period, he made a car for himself, very successful, everybody liked it, so he started making them for other people as well. And they continued to make them until the early 60s. And the big thing about the Bucklers was the space frame chassis. It's one of the first production cars to have a tubular space frame chassis, which made it very stiff, very light, and the handling was very, very good. So, and they then went on to make their own suspension system, independent front suspension. They also made close ratio gears, high ratio back axles, and lots of parts for not only for Bucklers but for other cars of that type as well. And at the time, it was a very successful car. Sadly, in the early 60s, Derek Buckler died, and then the company didn't continue very much longer after that. So, but the cars, there's still quite a few of the cars around. We're never sure how many cars were actually made because the records were lost when the factory closed. But we think that there are something like 250 cars that were made, and we think that there's about 125 that we know of, and about half of those which we know exist now or are either on the road or in the process of being restored. So quite a good survival rate really for such cars.
And this car here, is this one of the originals?
Yes, this is a 1954, so it's quite an early one. And the 90 was built as a car you could use every day, but also for competition. So you could people raced them, and they raced them very successfully, and speed hill climbs and those sort of events. And it's extremely light, very, very light indeed. And this one has quite an interesting engine, in that most of them had Ford side valve engines, and this one's got an overhead inlet conversion on it, and 4 Amel carburetors and that sort of thing. But it's never been on the road. This car has never been completed.
Never been completed?
No, it was never completed. I rescued this a few years ago, and we were very fortunate to be able to rescue it because a few months later it would have been scrapped and would have disappeared forever. It was in a shed, in a garden, in a shed that had collapsed on top of it, and we couldn't even really get at it to see what it was like. So I bought it just to try and rescue it. Fortunately, it was rescuable. So we stripped the chassis down, did some repairs to the chassis, and are in the process of building it now.
So when do you think you'll be able to complete it?
Everybody asks that question. Yeah. Oh, next week or so. Anyway. No. Well, I hope to get it finished to compete next year. But like all these things, other things get in the way. And
so, what would you do with it? Would you put it into competition? I mean, was it eligible for something in the 750 Motor Club, maybe?
No, for speed hill climbing.
Oh, right.
Like places like Prescott and Shelsley Walsh in the historic classes. Yes, it would be too complicated to register it for the road because it's never been on the road, and that gets very complicated nowadays. So I'm building it to be as light as I possibly can to make it more competitive. So hence there's lots of aluminium in it.
And what about other models on the stand?
This is a Mark V. This is a well-known trials car that's been trialled very successfully for many years. It changed hands recently. Someone else in the Buckler register has taken charge of it and is in the process of getting it back up to scratch again. And I think they hope to trial that again. So that'll be very nice, keeping the history going. And this one, again, it's another Mark V, and that's again special car, supercharged, with special rear suspension, and it's being taken to the ultimate for its class in trialling. And it's a very nicely built car, and Carl's in the process of rebuilding it, and he's been doing some work on it today on the stand, so which is what we try and do.
So regarding the models, was any of the models ever raced by anybody of any distinction in racing racing drivers?
There was one car was built to race at Le Mans, which was called the DD1, which was a Didion axled car. Unfortunately, it didn't race at Le Mans. The chap who was sponsoring it and was responsible for it was unfortunately killed in an accident, and so it never actually got to Le Mans. And the car went to New Zealand, and there are an awful lot of bucklers overseas. There's a lot in New Zealand and there's Canada, etc. It went to New Zealand, and then last year was brought back again, and is now being rebuilt for circuit racing again. And that is a very nice car, very, very special.
Would that be eligible for the Le Mans Classic, do you think?
Probably, yes. Yes. I should imagine it would be, yes. Yeah. And it's being that's got a Coventry Climax engine, or actually will now have 2 Coventry Climax engines to run in the 1100cc class or the 1500cc class. And that's and we're glad that one is back, really, because it's a very historic part of the...
Watch this space, then.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And there was one of these, a Mark V, that was here last year that raced at Goodwood Revival last year and this year, and that's a nice car as well.
What category was that racing in?
Well, that raced in the St Mary's Cup, I think.
Oh, yeah.
It was in that category. It's racing against some quite big and powerful cars, so it's not really competitive in that. But it still acquitted itself very well, actually, for being such a small car and not really a racing car. So it was very good.
It's just good to see an old manufacturer and a small manufacturer coming back again.
Absolutely, yes, and it was bucklers were very significant in their day because of the space frame chassis. There were a lot of specials around, but this was really the one that had the most developed chassis, and hence why it was so successful in its day.
Well, thanks very much for the interview, Chris, and the information. Thank you.
Thanks.